As MCA Universal was going through a difficult period, its CEO Sidney Sheinberg saw that a third sequel to this franchise would likely make a good profit. Following the commercial success of the third film, despite generally attracting negative reviews, Sheinberg also saw an opportunity to promote the Jaws ride at Universal Studios. The studio fast-tracked this film into production in September 1986 so that it could be released the following summer. Steve DeJarnett had been approached by Universal's head of production Frank Price about writing the script. DeJarnett's script, however, was shelved when Price resigned in September 1986 following the disappointing performance of Howard the Duck. Around this time, Sheinberg approached Joseph Sargent about directing the film. Sargent had worked with Lorraine Gary in 1973's The Marcus Nelson Murders, for which he won his first Directors Guild of America award. And so, Joseph Sargent would go on to direct the fourth and final film in this franchise in the 1987 film Jaws: The Revenge.
Smile, you son of a bitch!
Let them fight.
You're a wizard, Harry.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. I'll be back.
Death has come to your little town, June.
All right, everyone, how are we doing today? Back here for another episode of Chills and Thrills. Connor here along with Chris. And today we are doing Jaws: The Revenge. And one thing I have to bring up right away is on our last episode, Chris said that for Jaws 3 or Jaws 3D, that it was the hardest time he's had on this podcast so far watching a film, and he will probably not go back and revisit that one. So I am 100% curious to see how you felt about this one.
Yeah, I think I spoke a little too soon. uh, you know, uh, Jaws 3D not looking so shabby after this one. you know, this isn't the kind of podcast where we're not in the business of just roasting horrible movies, but this will probably be the closest we get to kind of just roasting a bad movie.
Yeah, this one is a tough watch. I still liked it as a kid because I'm a big shark nerd and animal nerd and stuff like that. But this is definitely one of the shark movies I do not go back to very often.
It's a struggle session for sure.
There are things to like about it, like Michael Caine as Hoagie. Like I didn't
Mhm.
have anything about him. I like him as an actor, so seeing him in this,
Yeah.
it's always nice. And then
Yeah, this is probably the youngest I've ever seen Michael Caine, and somehow he still comes across as old.
yeah.
Like it's like Michael Caine it's like Morgan Freeman. Like for my lifetime, they've just perpetually been old. The youngest I ever saw Michael Caine was, I guess, in the third Austin Powers movie where he was still playing Austin Powers' dad. And it's like, so he was still like old then. And then he's been in all the Christopher Nolan movies. So it's like, he's been old my entire life, and then you go back to a movie from the 80s and it's like he's definitely less old, but he still feels pretty old. It's interesting.
Well, and then because of my mom, I remember him in like the Miss Congeniality movies with like Sandra Bullock and whatnot, and so
Okay.
I watched them with her when I was younger, and then seeing him in this, and like you said, the Christopher Nolan films, and there's little things to like about this film, but overall, it's not anything to sit here and love or anything like that. And if you're a
Yeah.
huge fan of the Jaws franchise, you'll probably still enjoy this one. I still put it on once every now and again when I'm bored or just don't know what to watch. I might throw this one on here and there, but it's definitely not anywhere close to the first one or even the second or third.
Yeah, and I mean, this kind of does the thing where it sort of seems to ignore the existence and events of Jaws 3, or doesn't acknowledge them. It's its own thing. So in a sense, it's sort of a new direct sequel to Jaws 2. So in the competition of third Jaws movies, I would say that Jaws 3D is the superior one, and that's a heck of a statement.
Yeah, I knew as soon as on the last episode you were kind of ripping into Jaws 3 a little bit. I'm like, "Oh, this guy does not know what he's in for."
Yeah, it's like you don't know. It's like we're still not even to the worst yet.
And to think that there's worse shark movies out there than this, like way worse. That's a
Yeah.
tough thought.
Well, and part of it is that these are, the original Jaws isn't just like a great shark movie. It's one of the great adventure blockbuster summer movies of all time, And so it's not just, oh, it's a really good shark movie with some really bad sequels. It's like it's either the greatest, or depending on your very personal preferences, easily top one or two greatest shark movies ever. And it's followed up by these completely generic movies that are just using the name and using the theme song and just not nearly on that level.
Yeah, and it doesn't tarnish the reputation of the first one at all. It kind of hurts the franchise because they haven't had a movie since what now for Jaws 1987, I believe this came out. And I mean, I don't know if we'll, like we've said before, if we'll ever get a film with the name Jaws again. I mean, maybe not in our lifetime, maybe down the road when CGI or whatever is stupid, prolific, and whatnot. But
Hmm.
I don't see another Jaws film being made. Of course, shark movies will be made, but probably not
Yeah.
another one with the name Jaws.
And I would say what I think it contributes most to is that, a lot of these classics that then have a string of less good sequels, a lot of times when the sequels get truly, truly bad, it sort of causes people to just kind of group all of the sequels together. Like, oh, you have Jaws, which is great. And then all those terrible ones, like Jaws 3D and Jaws the Revenge. And it sort of makes people overlook the fact, well, it's like, well, Jaws 2 was actually, I mean, compared to 3 and 4, Jaws 2 is a masterpiece, It's like that was a legitimate attempt at a sequel with a sense of continuity and carryover from the cast, and the world felt the same, and it's like that felt like an earnest, sincere, legitimate attempt at making another Jaws movie, even if it was never going to be anywhere near as good as the first. And then 3 and The Revenge just feel like total nonsense. But then everyone just wants to say, well, the first one's good and all the others are crap. It's like, well, the second one's not crap. It's a lot like the Psycho movies, Everyone just kind of thinks like there's the original and then all the garbage that followed, when Psycho 2 is actually pretty exceptional, in my opinion. So that's neither here nor there.
I've heard the second and third Psycho are actually pretty good, so I need
I
to tune
I
into
I
them.
I would agree with that. I think 3 isn't as good as 2, but I think the first 3 are pretty legit, and 2 is way better than it has any rights to be. To be made 20 years later and to be kind of complementing a masterpiece like that and trying to make it like it was two halves of one big story instead of that movie just being a self-contained story. I think you couldn't have done a sequel to Psycho any better than they did.
I have only seen the first one, and the second and third one have been on my list. So with you recommending them, and I've read some reviews that they're
At
pretty
least number
good.
2. At least number 2. I can understand that people are like, ah, 3 is maybe not as much. It's better than most, but I mean, 2 is 2 I would go to bat for 100%.
All right, I'll have to turn that on here soon because I
I think it's
I
on
like the
Netflix.
first one. All
I
right,
think it's on Netflix last I
definitely.
checked.
I will have to check it out because, like I said, I like the original, and I even like the Vince Vaughn remake. Not as good as the original classic, but I do enjoy those too. So I'll definitely have to check those out.
Yeah, when like uh, I'm going on a diatribe here. We'll talk about the Psycho remake some other day.
That's all right. But getting back to what you were saying, like yeah, the first Jaws it's a masterpiece as we've said in these couple episodes. The second one, it's definitely it doesn't quite live up to the original, but it's definitely a sequel that's worth giving a chance and watching. And then it feels like you said the second or the third and fourth one they're just cash grabs with the name Jaws, and with the time gap in between the movies, there was what, 4 or 5 years in between the second and third one, and then another 4 years between Jaws 3 and Jaws the Revenge. You think they would be able to put out a pretty quality product with the studio giving them a decent, chunk of money, and it's just not what they ended up giving or returning to the studio and us fans.
Yeah, and it just started to feel, with Jaws the Revenge, it started to feel like, did they go with Lorraine Gray because she was the only one who said yes? Like, they asked everyone else and they pursued these other options, and then like they were like scraping and be like, well, we've got to get someone back from the first movie, or someone that gives us an air of legitimacy. And like, no disrespect to her or whatever, but it feels like a lot of taking it for the paycheck going on with this movie.
I mean, if somebody offered me a part in a crappy movie and offered to pay me a decent amount, I'm probably going to take it too. But
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's a totally human response. It's just, it's kind of a shame because it feels like the art, for whatever it's worth, the value of the quality of the content feels like it suffers.
yeah, I'll get into some background on it, because I mean there are a couple things to like about this film, and I'm sure we'll get into it when we get into like character, and there's a couple scenes to talk about that I like. So I'll give you some background on the film first.
Hmm.
Jaws: The Revenge is a 1987 American horror film produced and directed by Joseph Sargent. The fourth and final film in the Jaws franchise. It stars Lorraine Gary, who came out of retirement to reprise her role from the first two films, along with new cast members Lance Guest, Mario Van Peebles, Karen Young, and Michael Caine. Acting as a sequel to Jaws 2 and ignoring the events of Jaws 3D, and continuing with the Brody family beginning on Amity Island. The film was made in less than 9 months, with production commencing in September 1986 so that the film could be released the following summer. The film was shot on location in New England and in the Bahamas and completed on the Universal lot. As with the first two films, Martha's Vineyard was the location of the fictional Amity Island for the opening scenes, and delays caused by the mechanical shark and the weather led to concerns about whether the release date would be met. Many critics suggest that the rushed production compromised the quality of the film, and this film, marketed with the new infamous tagline, "This time it's personal," Jaws: The Revenge was the lowest grossing film in the franchise. It was universally sorry. It was universally
Panned.
yeah. The word I got here, that's why I was laughing, is lambasted.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a perfectly fine word choice as well.
It was universally lambasted by critics and audiences alike, who lamented the weak story, poor acting, and cheap-looking effects, and felt like the franchise had run its course. So there's a little background on the film Jaws: The Revenge.
Yeah, maybe some Dennis Quaid in this movie would have made it at least a little more enjoyable.
Something we'd have had some cocaine on set to spice it up and get some action, and
Yeah.
we'd have done something a little different.
Yeah, it would have been a party for sure.
All right, well, how about we hop into a trailer, get into a plot synopsis, and we'll come back with a couple fun facts here, some numbers, and we'll keep her rolling on Jaws: The Revenge.
Will do.
Instinctively, man has always been drawn to the sea. Its beauty, its mystery, its secrets. But there is also a vague uncertainty, a sense of intrusion into an alien world, where man is unwelcome and completely at the mercy of the most terrifying predator on Earth. Man's deepest fear has risen again. Jaws: The Revenge. This time, it's personal.
On Amity Island, Martin Brody, famous for his deeds as the police chief, has died from a heart attack. Martin's widow Ellen still lives in Amity, close to her younger son, Sean, and his fiancée, Tiffany. Sean works as a police deputy, and when he is dispatched to clear a log from a buoy a few days before Christmas, a great white shark appears and tears off his arm. He screams for help, but the singing on land drowns out his cries. The shark sinks his boat and drags him underwater to his death. Martin's older son, Michael, his wife Carla, and their 5-year-old daughter Thea come to Amity for the funeral. Michael works in the Bahamas as a marine biologist, and on his arrival, Ellen demands he stop his work. Having just received his first grant, Michael refuses. Thea convinces Ellen to return to the Bahamas with them. The pilot of their small plane, Hoagie, takes an interest in Ellen when he flies them back. Wanting to take her mind off her recent losses and finding herself attracted, she begins spending time with him. Michael introduces his mother to his colleague Jake and his wife Louisa, and they spend Christmas and New Year's together. A few days later, Michael, Jake, and their crew encounter the shark, which followed the family from Amity. Jake is eager to research it because great white sharks have never been seen in the Bahamas due to the warm water. Michael asks him not to mention the shark to his family. During the day, Ellen can keep her mind off the shark, but at night she has nightmares of being attacked by it. She is also able to feel when the shark is about to attack one of her loved ones. Jake decides to attach a device to the shark that can track it through its heartbeat. Using chum to attract it, Jake stabs the device's tracking pole into the shark's side. The next day, the shark ambushes and chases Michael through a sunken ship, and he narrowly escapes. Thea goes on an inflatable banana boat with her friend Margaret and her mother. While Carla presents her new art sculpture, the shark attacks the back of the boat, killing Margaret's mother. After, Thea is safe. Ellen boards Jake's boat to track down the shark, intending to kill it to save her family. After hearing about what happened, Michael confesses he knew about the shark, infuriating Carla. Michael and Jake are flown by Hoagie to search for Ellen and find the shark in pursuit of their boat. During the search, Hoagie explains to Michael about Ellen's belief that the shark that killed Sean is hunting her family. When they find her, Hoagie lands the plane on the water, ordering Michael and Jake to swim to the boat as the shark drags the plane and Hoagie underwater. Hoagie escapes from the shark, and Jake and Michael hastily put together a device that emits electrical impulses. As Jake moves to the front of the boat, the shark lunges up and mauls him. Jake manages to get the device into the shark's mouth before being dragged underwater. Michael begins blasting the shark with the impulses which drive it mad. It repeatedly jumps out of the water, roaring in pain. Michael continues blasting the shark with the impulses, causing it to leap out of the water again. Ellen steers the sailboat towards the shark, while thinking back to the shark's attack on Thea and also imagining Sean's death, and Martin defeating the first shark. As the shark is rearing up, she rams the broken bowsprit of the boat into it. The impaling causes the shark to immediately explode, and its corpse sinks to the bottom of the ocean. Michael hears Jake calling for help, seriously injured but still alive. A short time later, Hoagie flies Ellen back to Amity Island. Alright, let me knock out some fun facts for you here. Bruce the Rubber Shark was nominated for a Golden Raspberry Award for the worst actor in this movie, thus making him the first animal nominated for one since Jaws 3D's Shrieking Dolphins, Cindy and Sandy.
Sheesh, and the sad thing is like, was he the worst actor in this movie? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I know the
No.
shark did not look good in this, but
Yeah.
there's
Look, and I will say, it doesn't, like the movie, like there's nothing to write home about any of these performances, but it didn't feel like I was watching a joke. It didn't feel like I was like, my gosh, we're really on like Sci-Fi Channel levels of acting. Now the writing, we can talk about some of the writing, but like it felt like, it didn't feel like it was like a sham of a movie or anything like that in general, like in terms of the performances people were giving, it felt like they were trying,
No, and then like I know the shark does not look good in this film, but I don't know if you've ever seen there's somebody on YouTube who like redoes sequences and movies with like updated special effects and stuff.
Oh, is that the Corridor Crew you're talking about?
I'm not sure, but they redid the chase scene in this where the shark is
Huh.
chasing Mike, and it
Okay.
it looks phenomenal. The shark looks good, the movements look fluent. So
That's
if they
cool.
could have done
That's cool.
something like that for this, I would have been on board.
That's cool. That's awesome.
I might have to. If I can find that, I'll send it to you.
Nice. Nice.
Michael Caine is the second actor to follow up an Academy Award winning performance with a Razzie Award nominated performance in a Jaws sequel. The first was Louis Gossett Jr., who won an Oscar for An Officer and a Gentleman in 1982, and then was nominated for a Razzie for Jaws 3D in 1983.
Yeah. I feel like the reason Christopher Nolan keeps putting Michael Caine in movies is just to like give him a better legacy than Jaws the Revenge. He's like for every Jaws the Revenge that Michael Caine was in, Christopher Nolan's like, I'm gonna put him in 10 masterpieces.
You got to do something. I mean, I
Yeah.
like I said,
Save that legacy.
there's some bad acting in this, and then there's some mediocre to normal acting. There's nothing great. Clearly, why there's Razzies and not anything above that.
Yeah, and I heard there was all manners of production difficulties and stops and starts or behind the scenes problems and all this thing. It's the usual stuff. Most horrible movies have a lot of stories behind them that help explain some of the conditions of why they're horrible, but all we have is the final product to look at. We can't judge everything on a curve of how hard it was to make it.
Yeah, we can. There's only so many special features we can see that they show us the problems, or most of the
Well, and
special
also
features are.
Well, and you also have to wonder how many bad movies come out and they're bad, and everyone then just wants to be like, well, it's not our fault. There was all these horrible things that happened, and it's like you wonder, it's like, what's how much can we verify that? I'm sure if I was in a horrible movie or involved in a bad movie, I would have 800 reasons under the sun of why it was bad. I'd be like, who knows how legitimate any of that is.
Yeah, you got me beat. I mean, there's always going to be stories, and especially behind the scenes, like we've dealt with the Friday the 13th franchise. The producers are blaming the director's blaming the studio. What really happened to these films that are bad, that turned
Mm-hmm.
out to be bad.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Indeed.
This is the only Jaws movie that doesn't take place in the summertime. The original Jaws took place around the 4th of July weekend. Jaws 2 took place in June, and Jaws 3 took place at some point in the summertime. And this movie takes place around the Christmas and New Year's holiday. So I thought that was clearly like they go to the Bahamas and it's sunshine and everything. But when we're in Amity in this, it is, there's
Yeah.
snow on the ground, it's cold. So that was a nice little twist to that beginning.
Yeah. The big. I mean, not to go further into it, but like the beginning scenes of the movie are really the best stuff it has to offer, in my opinion. But I mean, I'm sure we'll get a little bit more into that later.
This is also the only Jaws sequel not to be numerated. The reason being in this film is retroactively the third film. Universal was so disappointed by Jaws 3D's critical and box office response that this film was now the canonical third film. This is reinforced by the fact that an ad that went out in the newspapers saying, "See the final installment of the Jaws trilogy." However, critics and audiences were even less receptive to this film, which led to this being the final film in the franchise.
Yeah, I was gonna say if they were looking to redeem themselves after Jaws 3D, like I can only imagine the thoughts rolling through their heads when they finally saw this finished turd. Like I'm like, and also awfully bold to do the whole, to literally call it the third chapter of the Jaws trilogy, like to just kind of step over the third one. Like we've seen movies that kind of do the whole, that would have been like calling the 2018 Halloween movie be like, see the second chapter of the Halloween saga. It's like, yes, you're doing the reboot thing where it's a sequel to only the original movie, but you don't then like start calling it like the second entry. I don't know. That's odd to me.
Yeah, I mean, if you're like you said, if you're gonna like try to erase something like or retroactively get rid of the third film in the series and like ignore it, you got to do something better because I mean, most
yeah,
people
yeah.
in the
It's worse than the third one in pretty much every way, except for like the third one has the annoying like 3D gimmick. But
yeah,
outside of that, pretty much everything about the third one is better than this one. I mean, geez.
yeah, and most people, most people look at the Jaws franchise and they can look at them and rank them from the last film to the first film. 4, 3, 2, 1, and
Oh,
that's
it's totally that way.
yeah.
Yeah, it literally gets worse with every entry.
Yeah,
Just
and
like yeah, for me, the original Star Wars saga 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think they progressively get better. Like if you order them chronologically, I think in the original six, I put the Phantom Menace at the lowest, and then Return of the Jedi is my favorite, and they're in that order. But that's just me. I know that's a hot take. I'm not here to get Star Wars involved in all this, but that's my take on the Star Wars movies. They get
Hey, our listeners will be sending you comments about that. No.
and Disney Star Wars isn't real Star Wars.
Once an episode, Chris has to make that comment. I love it. I love it.
I don't know how many times I've done it, but I will never stop.
I will take it. I will take it every time I can get it. Oh, when Michael returns home to his mother's after his brother is killed, in her living room are several guests, including Lee Fierro, who played Miss Kittner in Jaws from 1975, and her character's son Alex Kittner was the second victim killed by the shark. Also, Fritz Lane Courtney, who played Miss Taft in the first two Jaws movies, is also present. So it's nice to, when I was a kid, I didn't really notice these, two characters from the first film and the second film. And then once I became a teenager and stuff, I caught on to that. And now rewatching it for this, I definitely was like, oh, there's her, and like clearly you remember these things and you can point them out pretty easily.
Yeah, you can see that attempts were made to kind of do the like, okay, if we don't see Jaws 3D as a legitimate sequel, what can we do to try and make this one feel a bit more legitimately connected to the first two? Bringing Lorraine Gray back is one move, and trying to do draw these other little tethers to the first two, but it just doesn't feel quite right. If they had been able to bring back, oh gosh, his name's escaping me. Roy Scheider, Shader. I can't pronounce his name right, but if they'd been able to bring him back as Brody and done one last hurrah in this one somehow, like that would have added a big air of legitimacy to it of being like the true part three.
Even bring back like a Richard Dreyfuss to work with the son.
Yeah.
I worked with your dad.
Yeah,
And he passed away, and
dude, you just pitched a better idea than Jaws 3 or 4 for it to be like, hey, maybe the dad's out of the picture, maybe he's not going anywhere near the water, but maybe you have like, because then you can do the whole like, I worked with your dad, and maybe one of the sons is estranged from the dad, and they're kind of mending the relationship by having the Richard Dreyfuss character be there and be that sort of like connection between the two. There could have been all kinds of interesting things going on.
man, we need to get to Hollywood and write a couple scripts. 'Cause we've had a couple good chats.
Something.
I got two more for you here on fun facts. Each Jaws movie plants the method of the shark's destruction a little earlier. In Jaws 1975, Hooper warns Brody about the air tank will blow up if you screw around. Blah. Will blow up if you screw around with it. In Jaws 2, Hendrix and the old man find the power line, which later electrocutes and sets fire to the shark. In Jaws 3 or 3D, an argument ensues about Phillips Fitzroyce using grenades, and in this movie, Jake is working on a transmitter that sends out high-frequency signals. So, if you pay attention, they do little callbacks to how the shark will eventually meet its demise, which is fun.
Yeah, a little bit of foreshadowing, and there's a great sort of it's a piece of, I think, literary advice or script writing advice that said something to the effect of, don't show a gun in act 1 unless you're going to fire it in act 3, and in general the perspective is that the later and more crucial something's going to be, the earlier and more mundane its introduction should be. Like if Like if you're gonna have your saving throw at the very end be, this bomb or this gun or whatever, then you should have that casually presented as early as possible so that people forget about it, but that it's also was like always there from the beginning, so it's not shocking. So it's like that's they're following the fundamentals here.
Yeah, I mean, it's always nice to be able to reach back and see that foreshadowing, like, oh, okay, I see what you did there. So I always like doing that, seeing that, or reading that in, like, the fun facts, and especially if I don't know it or recognize it in the film.
Yeah, 100%.
My last one here for you is this movie has the lowest body count of the series with a total of 2 victims, Sean Brody and Margaret's mother on the banana boat, thus including Jake's death in the alternative version of the movie. Throughout the 4 movies, there were a total of 19 deaths shown or implied. There were 5 in the original Jaws, 7 in Jaws 2, 5 in Jaws 3, and then 2 in this movie. So I
It's very disappointing that there was only 2 kills, 2 people who died in this entire movie. I'm like, what kind of a shark movie what kind of any kind of thriller or horror movie or whatever has 2 victims, Like it's one thing if you're making something like Signs where it's this sort of it's more about it's like a thriller scenario, so you don't really have to have victims, but it's a killer shark movie and it kills 2 people, and Jake surviving his attack at the end of the movie is the biggest like I call bullcrap moment ever. Like I liked that character just fine, and it was actually a pretty meaningful moment when he gets killed at the end, but it's like, dude, there is no way he should have survived. Like, are you kidding me?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I agree with you. I don't think he should have survived. Am I glad that he survived? Yes, because I like that character. But I mean, he fell right into the shark's mouth, and the
And
shark
he lost
chomped
like
down.
8 gallons of blood into the
Yeah,
water. Like, dude, like what? And like not only survived, but they make it like he was like poked in the shoulder. Like he's like making jokes and quips about it. It's like, dude, it's like he should have nothing short of like life-threatening lacerations all over his body, considering the amount of blood he lost. And they're just like, "Ah, Jake," it's like, what? What are you talking about? Like I don't know. I don't
I
know.
always go back to a line that Mike said, and he's like something to the part of, "Don't do anything stupid and die on me, all right?" And he's like, "No, man, I'm way too mean for that."
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
it always
which
gives me a laugh because it's like you definitely should be missing an arm or something.
yeah, that's the thing. It's like when they find him, I'm like, well, how damaged is he? And it's like, oh, he's got like a couple of scrapes. It's like he didn't like fall onto a barbed wire fence. It's like he was being chomped on by a shark and there's blood everywhere. Like, I don't it's like, oh man, it's like just the icing on the cake for like the weird absurdity of this movie.
I will, if he was an annoying character or something, I would be upset. But him surviving, I'll take it with a little grain of salt.
Yeah, the largest whole salt lamp is what I'll take it with.
Oh, I'll get some numbers out here for you. So the budget for Jaws: The Revenge was $23 million, and it had a box office return of 51.9, or right around 52 million. And as always, Chris will have our inflation numbers for that.
Yeah, so roughly equivalent. That would be the budget being about 63.9 or 64 million, and the box office return being about 144 million. So, just shy of doubling the budget, but when you consider, the theaters keeping their cut, the marketing costs, things of that nature, probably not, certainly not a flop or failure. They didn't like lose their rear on this movie or anything, but certainly not very good. Certainly a far cry from the previous entries, and certainly a reason to kind of call it quits on the franchise.
Yeah, and I mean that. I wish we would have got something that gave the Jaws series a little bit of life in it, but as we've stated before, that they just these films just kept getting worse. And I mean, we've gotten
And
so
you
many shark movies since
and
then
you
that
almost think, yeah, you almost think that like if they had this kind of approach when they were doing Jaws 3D, which was don't do the 3D gimmick, but try and make as legitimate of a sequel to the first two as possible. Like, let's see if we can get some cameos or some returning characters, and like if this had been the mentality they had brought several years earlier when they made Jaws 3 the first time, maybe the whole endeavor could have worked out a little bit more. But it's like messing up Jaws 3 the first time, and then several years later you try to do Jaws 3 again. It reminds me a lot of what they've been doing with the Terminator movies. It feels like every time they do a new Terminator movie, it's just attempting to be Terminator 3 over again. Like everyone is like, just follow the first two and then watch our movie. Just follow the first two, then watch our movie. And it feels like they've done that like 4 times. And so it's like, well, and it ends up being that the first Terminator 3 is still the best Terminator 3. So, you know.
This film was rated a 3 out of 10 on IMDb. This is a lowly 2% rating on Rotten Tomatoes with a 15% rating on Metacritic, a 2.4 out of 5 Google rating. I could not find
Google being very generous.
I couldn't find a Google users for this film, so that might be a really bad
Yeah,
part.
even the Google users turned their back on this one.
Yeah, they were not just clicking away. They were skipping this one.
The generation that uses Google does not even consider Jaws the Revenge a movie.
Well, and then this is one of the more disappointing stats that, again, there's only 2 deaths in this film, which averages out to about 1 every 43 and a half minutes, which, I mean, with this movie could have been better, clearly, as we've stated. But I mean, even if you just add a couple more shark attack sequences to the film we have, it would probably much improve what we got. You know, give us 2 or 3 more shark attack sequences. We don't need them to die.
Yeah,
Just give us
because
the attack.
well, because you've got Mike and Jake. It's like, putting on your sort of thinking hat here, you would think you want a couple victims in the movie, so give them a team instead of just the 2 of them. Why not give them like 2 or 3 kind of other members of their group? A lady, a dude, either like an older guy, younger guy, what have you, or like maybe like a pair of sisters or something. Like give them an extra like 2 or 3 support characters that then could be slowly picked off across the movie to kind of up the stakes and make things more dramatic and more engaging, and you could get some cool kills or sequences or whatever. Like you got to think about that kind of a thing. Like if you're like, oh, here's our 4 characters that are going to make it through the whole movie, and that's the only characters we have in the movie, it's like, well, you're going to be really light on death sequences then.
Well, and then you got, if you do something like that where a couple of their crew members get attacked, you got the mom, Lorraine Gary, kind of coming after the shark for revenge on her son, and then you have Mike and Jake kind of they might want revenge for their crewmates. And I've heard the story that Jaws the Revenge, what the subtitle was meant to be that the shark was out for revenge, and I just don't like and agree with that at all.
Well, I mean, dude, everything in this movie that line applies to. I don't like and agree with that at all. It's like, so what? It's like they've killed the sharks in the previous movie. So what? Is this a family member of the prior sharks? Is it, like, what are they implying here? That the shark's coming back in the body of another shark, or that the shark has family that's taking revenge? And then it's like, this time it's personal. What are you talking about? Like, sharks holding grudges? Like, it's so wild of a concept, and the weird kind of psychic thing she's got going on with it, like it's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, we could read this script when we were younger and been like, no, bud, this isn't gonna work. We
yeah,
need
if I was like 10, this script is bulletproof. But like the minute you turn like 12, it's like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. I almost would have preferred maybe, I thought that she was maybe going to end up sacrificing herself to save her other son at the end of it. I thought it was going to be, well, she lost her youngest son at the start, and then at the end it was going to be she's going to sacrifice herself and save the older son in some scenario. That's what I thought was going to happen.
And that might have even been a better ending. It almost like full closure for that character.
Yeah,
her
exactly.
husband is dead. He, in the movie, she states that the fear of another shark, like another impending shark attack, killed him. And then the shark kills her
Yeah,
younger son in the beginning.
don't. We're gonna get into our favorite things of this category and that category, and I've got a dishonorable mention as much as an honorable mention for some of this.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, I'll go ahead and get right into it, and I'll ask who your favorite character was.
So it goes without saying it's Hoagie, because at least it's Michael Caine playing him, and he's got charm, and he's fun, and he's interesting. I can't imagine if you had asked me in this movie about the age dynamic between him and Lorraine. Is it Lorraine Gray or Lorraine Gary? Lorraine.
I believe it's Gary.
Yeah, Lorraine Gary. Okay, sorry, I wanted to make sure I got it right. I would have said, watching this movie, that like, why is Michael Caine going after this lady who's like 10 years older than him, but he's actually a few years older than her. And I'm not trying to insult her or anything, but it feels like a guy going after like he's already like an older silver fox kind of a guy, and it feels like even he is going after an older woman, and it's like, oh man, that's just the way it looks. That's not how it is. She's a few years younger, but man, I'm like, I feel like even this version of Michael Caine could probably be going after someone much more appealing than Lorraine Gary, but that's neither here nor there. But Hoagie's my favorite character, just because of Michael Caine's performance.
I ended up going with Jake as my favorite character just because he was like this goofy guy, and like, I'm one who, even at work, my coworkers know, or my friends, family know, I like to joke around, have a good time, and he was just one of those characters who one of the people who's easy to like, and he was all for like, well, screw these snails, they'll be here when we get back, like, let's study the shark, and like, that would definitely be me. Like, I've been a shark lover and fanatic since I was younger, so I could easily see myself becoming good friends with Jake from this film, so that's why I ended up choosing him as my favorite character.
Gotcha. That's defensible.
My favorite score for the film, I wasn't a huge fan of the score of the third one or this fourth one. The first two I'm definitely a fan of, but this one I ended up choosing a track where it's Plane Buzz's Shark, and it's where Hoagie and Mike and Jake, they're flying out to kind of go, I don't know if you want to say rescue the mom character or Lorraine Gary's character, and they land, and the shark actually attacks Hoagie while he's in the plane, and it's like a little bit of Jaws theme thrown in with like a little bit not, and I don't know why I liked it. I guess there just wasn't a lot to choose from in this film, but of course I'll crop some in here, and so any listeners can hear it. But that was the soundtrack I chose, was Plane Buzz's Shark.
Yeah, that's actually the one I picked as well. I'm pretty sure I pleaded the fifth on the third movie, and I wanted to make sure I found something here. I can't just be like, well, it's not John Williams, so it all sucks, even though that's kind of my opinion. But yeah, that was actually the track that kind of, it's like, if you gotta, you can't fault anyone for not being John Williams, but it's like, that was a solid track. It's like, try as they might, they're never gonna match the classic.
No, and even the Jaws 2 soundtrack, there were quite a few tracks in there that they set the scene well and stuff like that. But this film, all in all, like I said, I am a Jaws fan. I like this franchise, but this is it's not a good movie. But the soundtrack doesn't help. Some of the characters help a little bit.
This episode of Jaws Revenge could be about 10 seconds long, and all it needs is you saying it's not a good movie.
Am I going to recommend it or tell you to watch it? I guess we'll find out. But in my opinion, it's not.
Yeah.
And I'm comparing this when I say it's not a good movie. I'm thinking of Jaws and Jaws 2, and
Of
it.
course, yeah. They got to
So
be judged on their own standards, and this franchise has 4 entries, and it's got one exceptional one pretty solid good one, and then it just gets worse and worse.
I 100% agree with you, and I'm sure most people that have seen this franchise or watched this franchise over the years would agree. I have seen some people put Jaws: The Revenge above Jaws 3, and I'm not one.
I mean, it must be nice to be a cokehead. I don't know.
I'll I'll ask you what was your favorite quote from this bad movie?
So, okay. So the dishonorable mention comes first, which is when Michael is arguing with Ellen and he says, Dad died of a heart attack. And she says, No, he died from fear. The fear of it killed him. I'm like, that's got to be one of the all time stupid, hokey lines of dialogue ever written to try and make his off-screen death from a heart attack somehow tied into the premise of the movie. It's like, oh, the fear of the shark is what caused him to have a heart attack. Like, what a way to just kind of pee on the grave of this character who was the hero of the first 2 movies. It's like, okay, he kills 2 killer sharks, but then the fear of it makes him have a heart attack later. Okay, fair enough. So that's the dishonorable mention. Then there's a discussion had later between Michael Brody and Carla Brody where he goes, How come it's my responsibility? She says, Because. He says, Oh, okay, now I understand. All you had to do was explain it. I take out the garbage because. And it's like, I'm like, that's legit. It's like one thing that's been nice about these Jaws movies is it does feel like they try to give some special attention to the sort of domestic lives of the sort of leading couple, whether they're the married couple or this or that or the whatever, across all the movies. Like they always try to make them have a charming dynamic between the Brodies and etc. And so this movie's at least trying to do a little bit of that, trying to keep that home life charm alive, and you get some flashes of it.
Yeah, and I ended up choosing them two as well. A quote from Michael Brody when him and Carla are kind of arguing, and she's torching her project and working on her project that she has to reveal, and he's telling her to turn the welder off and stuff like that, and she's like, no, I have work, and he's like, I've always wanted to make love to an angry welder. I've dreamed of nothing else since I was a small boy, and that gets a
Yeah,
hard laugh out of me
yeah,
every
yeah.
time.
I've got to throw the famous quote out from Michael Caine about this movie. This isn't from the movie, but this is about the movie, where someone asked him about Jaws: The Revenge, and he says, "I haven't seen it, but I have seen the house it bought my mother, and it's marvelous." And another version of the quote is him saying essentially the same thing. Like, I haven't seen it, I've heard it's rubbish, but I saw the house that it built, and it's fantastic. So that just shows Michael Caine's whole opinion on this film. Not that he necessarily did it for the paycheck, but that he is very appreciative of the paycheck he got for this movie, even if the film itself isn't necessarily the best. And it's like, well, at least I'm again, this isn't the worst movie ever made or anything like that, but at least hopefully everyone was well compensated for the work they did, and that it all worked out for them in the long run.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, would I do a bad movie to buy my mom and myself a house or live comfortably for a while? Absolutely, I'll do a bad movie.
Oh yeah, because I've got no standards. I've got no career. If I had professional dignity, and I had a career, I like to think I'd be a little discerning. But that's also the thing. People talk all the time. They're like, most people when they're making a bad movie don't realize they're making a bad movie. Most people don't kind of have that moment of is this a big piece of crap until pretty late in the game. Certainly not when you sign on to do it. And once you sign on to do it, you're signed on. So it's like, oh, you sign on with this great script or this potential, and then they're like, oh, hey, our budget's been cut 30% and we have half as much time to film it. So we've deleted these 5 sections out of the screenplay and we've deleted that character. And now you're doing this instead of doing that. And it's like, well, I never would have signed up if this is what it was. It's like no one's ever pitched on the bad movie. They're pitched on the potential of the greatness that it can have.
Well, you want me to do Wrong Turn 16 and make 500
Oh yeah.
grand or something? Sure, why
Hey,
not? I'll
hey,
die.
hey, I'll make a better Wrong Turn movie than a lot of those sequels. I promise you that. I promise you that. I can't guarantee it'll be on the level of like the first one or maybe even the second one, but I'm sure I can make a not the worst Wrong Turn movie.
I, I'll write it. You direct it. We'll be in there.
We could do that. We can make it happen.
I'll give you my favorite scene from the film, and I liked even though the shark looked bad. I like when the shark actually chases Mike Brody, and it's just a fun scene. I like that's one of the few highlights in the movie for me. The shark actually chases him. Would it have fit where it actually chased him into that sunken ship or whatever it was? I don't think so. But there's not a lot to highlight in this film. So when you have a 5 to 7 minute chase scene where 80% of it is showing Mike and the shark, that's probably one of the highlights of the film, and it ended up being my favorite scene in the film.
Yeah, that's a good sequence. I liked when they finally sort of blew up the shark, I suppose. Uh I mean, you know, sort of the whole, I guess, kind of climax there. It's legit. I was glad the movie was finally ending. But it's like it just finally like ramps up. Like it felt like there's a whole lot of like I don't like to be one of these people where I'm like, oh, the movie was boring and nothing happened. But it's like stuff was finally starting to go down a little bit. Like oh, you think Jake's dead, and then like they set up and like you blow up the shark, and I did kind of. I didn't like a lot of the cross cutting and flashbacks they did throughout the movie, but kind of linking back to the original moment, like the smile, you son of a like. I did kind of dig that in the finale. I kind of got what they were going for, like closing the chapter a little bit, So it's like, yeah, I liked when they blew up the shark. I thought it was fun.
One of the you speaking of like the callback scenes, I actually liked when it showed the callback scene to Mike and his daughter actually following from what the chief did, and the chief
Hmm.
and his son did in the first one, where they're at the dinner table. And
Yes, that
I thought that was a
that
nice little touch.
that was good, and then I was, like, kind of off put by the fact that, like, after the fact, she's, like, mad that he was doing that with his daughter, like, it's like she's, like, upset and put off of, like, "Oh gosh, how it made me feel. It killed me to see you doing that, like, what you did with your dad." It's like, dude, it's like he's playing with his kid, and, like, he's, like, passing down this fun thing that his dad did with him with his daughter, and the mom's like, "Don't you know how that makes me feel?" Like, I'm like, "Geez," like, "Good gravy, lady. Like, let it go."
Yeah, she's definitely having a hard time in this film.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, understandably, but it's like, good lordy, be a nice grandma.
Yeah, we get that you've had this traumatic experience, but like your son and his wife, like everybody who you're with is going through that experience with you, and it almost makes her unlikable.
Yeah, you're almost being like a killjoy, like, geez Louise.
All right, I'll ask you what your there's not very many of them here, but what was your
Yeah.
favorite shark attack or shark sequence of the
Oh,
film?
it's definitely Sean's death at the beginning of the movie because honestly, it had me duped into thinking that I was about to watch a movie, not necessarily that was much, much better than what we got, but a lot less bad than what we got because his death scene is so sort of prolonged and grueling and like vicious and like, you know, that man, I was like, okay, I'm like, this movie's kind of like hardcore. Like, this is going pretty vicious with how they're handling this shark attack of this character. And so I thought the movie was going to maybe have more than a few of those sequences that you were going to have some characters that you spent some time with and then they were going to be like killed in a grueling kind of fashion, and that is not really how the film played out at all. So it kind of misled me into thinking I was going to be in store for if not a great shark movie but like a really really good like killer shark, popcorn movie, and it didn't live up to that at all. But like I do think that's an effective death scene for sure.
Yeah, like I mean, clearly I seen this at a way younger age, this being your first viewing. I That's absolutely a good attack sequence, and it's really intense. So it gets you thinking that okay, this movie's only an hour, and it's under an hour and a half long, hour and 25, hour and 27 minutes. It thinks that this might be a real quick paced, intense movie where we get some good deaths, some it might not be the best characterization, but we get some good characters, and that like you said, it kind of just misleads you, and I ended up going with the opposite attack of that, which was the shark attacks the banana boat, and who I found was Miss Ferguson is the lady that he killed from the banana boat, and I just the shark looks terrible compared to other films in that scene, but it jumps out of the water and it kind of just latches onto her leg. And I guess what chose that one for me is you see the shark taking Miss Ferguson or the woman underneath, and as the boat's driving away, you can hear faintly a kid yelling, "Mom, mom!" So it's kind of like if you hear that, it's kind of like an emotional, like, damn, like that's terrible. Like this kid just watched his or her mom being eaten and whatnot. So like that's why I ended up choosing that sequence for the shark attack.
Mhm. That's fair. That's fair.
Well, I think that's all we have on Jaws: The Revenge. There's not people who have
Yeah.
seen this movie know that it's not one of the better shark movies. You're probably not going to put it in your top 10 shark movies of all time, top 15. There's hundreds of shark movies out there. And I mean, if you like the Jaws franchise, that's the only way. I'm going to probably say if you haven't seen it, give it a try so you can appreciate the other Jaws films a little more.
Yeah, I mean, I always had a feeling in my life that there would come a day where I would finally watch all four of the Jaws movies instead of just the first two. So, I mean, I got to do it in this way and get to talk about it a little bit. But I can probably safely say that for the remainder of my days, I will probably only revisit probably the first Jaws movie ever again.
Oh, you can't. Oh, you're hating on my Jaws too.
No, I mean, like I said, probably, definitely. I can say with much more certainty, three in the Revenge, they're out the door. One, and then maybe two if I'm looking for a good time. If I'm looking for some extra.
Yeah, Jaws 3, I can put on and still have some fun with it. Jaws: The Revenge, it's I mean, we've said it before. I'll say it again. It is a bad shark movie. It's still a
Yeah.
shark movie, so I've always been a fan of it. But when it comes to rewatching something, if I want to watch a Jaws movie, I 99 times out of 100, I'm going to put on the original. And then that one other time, I'll probably put on Jaws 2. And it's very seldom I go back to the third one and Jaws: The Revenge. This was probably the first time I've watched Jaws: The Revenge in maybe 2 or 3 years. So, I mean, every now and again, I'll go back to it, but it is not very often at all.
Yeah, I made it 32 years. I think I can make it at least another 32 before I ever have to watch Jaws: The Revenge again. I,
So,
I suppose if I have to do like a Dennis Quaid marathon or a Michael Caine marathon, I guess they get included by default. But I don't foresee myself ever doing that.
at Chris's retirement party, we'll have this playing in the background.
Oh please, yeah. He died. At my funeral, he died of fear of that movie.
So I think Chris isn't recommending this to anybody. I'll recommend it to anyone who likes the Jaws franchise or shark movies.
I like that. Chris isn't recommending it to anyone. I'm recommending it to anyone. Oh,
Hey, if
jeez.
you're a shark lover,
Yeah.
throw it in and watch it.
Yeah. Well,
If
if
you're
you
not,
want to have an appreciation for, if anyone dares to say things like, "Oh, this shark movie or that shark movie's bad," it's like, man, watch Jaws: The Revenge and then hate on another shark movie.
exactly, you definitely will have more of an appreciation for those films like the original or Deep Blue Sea or The Shallows once you watch this one.
Indeed.
All right, I think that is all we have. So this is our final episode of Chills and Thrills podcast first year. So of course I always want to thank Chris for joining me. But one thing we have coming up, starting the new year 2025, we let our our fans, I guess you could say, or our listeners kind of vote on this on our Facebook page on what they wanted us to begin the new year with.
Our very high IQ fan base. That's what we call them.
Absolutely. And with an astounding, 43% of our voters chose the King Kong franchise. So we've done Godzilla, and we get to dip our toes right away into the new year into the King Kong franchise. And I think that is going to be an absolute blast.
Yeah, and the fan voting hasn't let us down so far. They got us to Trick or Treat, and now they've got us King Kong. Excellent choices so far. So we're gonna. I think we should keep that up.
Absolutely. So when we get closer to the end of our franchises, anyone who's listening, keep an eye on our Facebook page, and we'll have polls on there. We release polls for every episode, and I'm going to start putting them on Facebook as well, so everyone can vote and give their opinion on those. So it'll be fun. King Kong, I am ready for you. We go from a bad movie in this one to our very next episode going to an absolute classic of a monster movie. So I can't wait.
Indeed. Yeah, throw some suggestions in comments or whatever. If you've got either a franchise or a one-off movie that you want us to check out, throw them out there, and you never know where we might be able to slide it into the schedule or fit something into plans. It's pretty flexible around here, so if you've got something that you're dying to hear us talk about, then let us know.
Absolutely. What Chris said, I love it. But for the end of this episode, again, we have the 1933 King Kong on our next episode. So Chris, I will say thank you again for joining me. We did, what was it, about 53, 54 episodes this year, and only two of them got a bad vote from Chris. So we're not doing too bad so far.
Yeah. We've ended the first year very strong with the masterpiece that is Jaws: The Revenge, possibly the greatest movie ever made. So let's look forward to see if we can top it in 2025.
And like I said, we're gonna top it right away with that King Kong.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
no,
man.
in all seriousness, I couldn't do it without you, so I appreciate it. So again, thank you. Thank anyone who's out there listening, and until next time.
Have a good one, everybody.
I've always wanted to make love to an angry welder. I've dreamed of nothing else since I was a small boy.